It is an honor for me to invite Member of Knesset Zehava Galon, the Chairman of Meretz. His Excellency the President, the Judge Miriam Naor, members of Knesset, ministers, distinguished guests, one and all. Just a year ago, the President described what was called that formative speech of the four tribes. And he suggested various ways of acting. And I think that that speech was one of those amazing and rare speeches that one could immediately identify its paramount importance, that touched upon one of those topics that the Israeli society prepared to simply suppress. And such a sincere deliberation on all these, and you claim that people are not aware of that situation. After all, we are separated into four, the main tribes, which you claim today as well. And that really ties in with this towards a new Israeli agenda from vision to reality. Well, unfortunately, it is neither that. I think that shared life is the most basic issue that, of course, incumbent upon all of us to achieve. Just for a few years ago, Prime Minister said in an interview in all audacity, said that Israel's condition is excellent. I'm reminding you of that speech. If we just clean away the Haredim and the Arabs, yes, it is one of those old things and it's no longer considered something. But I am mentioning it because that expression teaches us about the worldview of the Prime Minister and teaches a great deal about us, we, those who accepted to forgive a prime minister, an acting prime minister, who just sort of immediately somehow eradicated or deleted a third of our people. And I was listening to the ministers who spoke, and I'm saying it with tremendous appreciation of the need to invest and exert efforts and allocate resources and generate these resources. But when the Minister of Finance, Moshe Kahlon, said that the development program for the Arab minority, but what is getting it stuck when we're talking about things that were supposed to amend and rectify the discrimination of years? Well, what is this kind of rhetoric that we can hear and the milestones that everyone is actually putting before us to step upon? What does it matter if the Prime Minister don't even think that they have to be taken into consideration, the Arabs or the ultra-Orthodox? But sometimes you can use them, especially when you want to lie in your election campaign. But they can basically just continue in that terrible sort of quandary of poverty and their terrible conditions, but our situation is excellent. It's incumbent upon us sincerity, attention, and those were rare qualities and very often part of the political profits. But over the last few years, this has become a burden, something that ought to be hidden. It's a problem because the future of the state of Israel, this state, depends on our readiness to look straight ahead at what is happening in the present and our readiness to be sincere about what we see. And yes, my dear friend, member of Knesset Ayman Odeh, said that at the end of his speech. But I'd like to talk about that elephant that's in the room that people don't really want to talk about. They say that this division is into four tribes is somewhat blinding. It is somewhat blinding because it ignores a fifth tribe that exists here, that lives here. So other than member of Knesset Ayman Odeh, no one else related to it, and it's important to relate to it. And I know justifiably so that one people don't always think about the Palestinians as a part of the state of Israel for good reasons, because they're aspiring for their own state, and many of the Israelis, me amongst them, truly hope that it will happen, that they will have their own state and they will establish it. But here, this is the 50th year of the occupation of the territories, and time is of the essence. We cannot embellish and beautify the truth and reality any longer, as the Palestinians are here. And we can start philosophizing and saying things whether we should call them or not. But it is obvious that they're living beside us, amongst us, within us, and their life has a very far-fetching influence on our lives, very similar to the influence that we have on their lives. And every conversation that we may discuss at an important event here at the President's residence, and I would like to congratulate you for this whole process that you've undertaken with the IDC. How does one promote and advance this kind of shared civic society? But every discussion that we have with shared hope and a shared future, every such discussion must also relate to that question. And one cannot talk about demographic trends of decades without pondering whether in 20 years' time we're going to send our soldiers to that kind of shadow country in the territories. One cannot talk about this big public that is not Zionist without pondering about the other non-Zionist big public that is not living in Israel, but Israel is living in its territories and running its life there. So before we talk about security, dangers, and various political arrangements, we know that it's incumbent upon us to stand here and saying, what do we want? Where do we want to be in 20 years' time? Do we want to celebrate 69 years of our actual control and administration in them? Do we want our grandchildren and our great-children to continue having to actually continue creating permits for entrance and permits for work for the Palestinians? Well, I've been thinking about this. Each person has had and suffered their war, their campaign, their terrorist attack, and a 7-year-old boy who was born to caste leg campaign, and another child of 16 was born to the Second Lebanese War. But I'm asking you all, are we willing to actually bring into this world the children of the next campaign and next war? I think that the most of the Israelis, the majority, will actually say no to these questions, and they do hope that there will be an Arab state conceding the territories, but they're frightened because they see what happened in the Gaza Strip, and they lived through the Second Intifada, and they're frightened that the territories that they withdraw from will become a second Gaza Strip, a source for bereavement and pain, and one can understand and identify and empathize with that fear. But after so many years, we must admit that this narrative is so much more complex, and not because of a fear do the government send soldiers to guard outposts that they themselves have defined as illegal, and not because of a fear of billions that are being transferred to those settlements and outposts that we do not want to be in. Yes, in Israel, there is Israeli politicians, for those who have not noticed, love talking about the Palestinians. And they talk about tactical issues, about demolition of houses and expelling families and various administrative detentions. But very often this hides a strategic, more important discussion about in what direction are we marching? Where are we going towards? Does Israel still want to send its children to the territories? And is it only because still remaining there because of security reasons? So why shouldn't all of us discuss the security arrangements that would enable us to extricate ourselves from there and move out? And after all, we do intend to hand these over. And there's no reason why the government of Israel shouldn't encourage the settlers to return to the borders of the State of Israel. and instead of giving all sorts of grants to people who want to live there. But if Israel is not willing to leave the territories and it wants a bi-national state, this impression that the Palestinians may actually disappear or literally evaporate one day, or perhaps we can remove the ultra-Orthodox and the Arabs from the statistics of inequality that the Prime Minister said 4 years ago, then we have to know about it. We ought to be told about it. We have to discuss it. And one cannot dance at all these weddings all the time. Ronald Lauder, the ambassador, spoke about the Bar Ilan speech in 1989, and I think the time has come for the people of Israel should know whether the Prime Minister is pro or con the Arab initiative. And if we're talking about building in the settlements, that is not only a contempt to our friends around the world, but it is a demonstration of contempt towards the citizens of the State of Israel, towards all those 4 tribes. We deserve to know where we are being led to, not with a little wink saying, yeah, beseder, it's going to be okay. We are worthy of knowing what it's going to look like in the future, what it's going to look like, because very often when you say the truth, it's described as something self-evidently, something nutty and audacity. But if we have a future, then we must start thinking about what it's going to look like. Where do we aspire to reach? Because all of us are in the same boat, so let's start navigating it.